All right, it is exactly 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and so that being said, and not to cut too much into our time that we have for today's webinar, we will go ahead and begin. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Checklist to Change, Rethinking Phases, Recovery, and Readiness for a Reunification in Your Family Treatment Court. My name is William Moore, and I'm with the National Training Technical Assistance Center. And as your host, I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of the Adobe Connect webinar platform and provide a few announcements for you all to please keep in mind. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be published on NTTAC's YouTube page. The webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can also view past webinars. For the transcript to the event or any other supporting materials, please contact OJJDP NTTAC's Help Desk. For those wishing to download a copy of the PowerPoint slides and other important documents, you may do so by locating the handouts pod directly above the chat area. Here you will also find an FAQ from our participants that will likely address any technical related issues. Click on the file name and then click the download button. All right. So it looks like some people may be having issues with audio, and so just want to give a couple of minutes for individuals to make sure that they are connected to the audio. Okay. And for those of us, a couple of my co-hosts will help to address any audio issues that you may have. Please look in your chat bar, and we will help assist you all for any audio issues for those who may be running into any audio issues. Now, please note during today's conversation, the presenters will address some of the questions that are posed during today's meeting. You may type your questions into the chat box as they arise. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute to help us count. Go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. If you are viewing alone, there is no need to type anything at this time. Again, for those of you who are viewing in a room or with additional people, please type in the total number of additional people that are viewing the webinar with you at this time. And I'll give folks a couple of seconds to do so. Following today's webinar, attendees will be sent a certificate of attendance. This certificate is sent approximately 1 hour following the conclusion of the event and is sent via the Adobe Connect thank you email. Please keep an eye out on your email for your certificate. Please note that only participants that are registered and signed in will receive a certificate of attendance. Conclusion of today's webinar, you will be provided with a link to a brief survey about today's presentation. The feedback that you provide is used to assist in future planning and training. I will now turn over today's meeting to our moderator, Tessa Richter, for today's web meeting.
Thank you, William. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Tessa Richter, and I'm a program associate with Children and Family Futures. Children and Family Futures is an organization based in California, and we do a lot of different work all about improving outcomes for children and families affected by substance use disorders, trauma, and mental health. One of the ways to do that is through family drug courts or family treatment courts, and we are the provider for the National Family Drug Court Training and Technical Assistance Program, which is supported by OJJDP, or the Office of Justice and Delinquency Prevention. So special thanks to them for supporting us. And the opinions expressed today are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of the Department of Justice. So again, thank you for joining us. We're here today as part of our FTC Learning Academy series. And the way that works is we post short, kind of 20-minute pre-recorded videos on our website that was posted a few days ago. And that covers the concepts and backgrounds of the topic. And then today we'll be hosting this conversation with a couple panelists who have really been diving into this work, and then opening up for some live Q&A with you all. And we also have a lot of handouts, materials, discussion guides, some things for you all to start working with your team in small steps or big steps to start doing some of this work. And so you'll see, we'll talk about those at the end too, but those are some of the handouts that are up there that William covered. So we're very excited to host this conversation today and bring together all of you innovative leaders and thinkers. There's been so much interest in this topic, really about how do we move from focusing on compliance and checklists and just phase requirements to really seeing and supporting behavioral change in our family treatment courts. We are just so excited that there's so much interest in this, and we think there's a lot of great ideas about how to start making this switch. There just seems to be a lot of awareness in general that something needs to happen a little bit differently. There's just been a shift in thinking from some of the more traditional drug court models, a way to put family back in family treatment court and to make our family treatment court model more responsive to the needs of our families and our systems. We've received a ton of great questions in preparation for today. I think between 400 and 500 questions. We have two panelists today that I'm going to introduce in just a second. You can see them there in our video. They've been in the throes of this work for a few years now, and so they'll be sharing their ideas and strategies and insights to start thinking about this and how you can apply some of these approaches in your jurisdiction. So first, I'll introduce Julie Spielman. She is the administrator for the 35th Judicial Circuit of Missouri's Treatment Court, and she oversees the Family Treatment Court in Dunklin County, Missouri. So Dunklin County is a rural jurisdiction in southeastern Missouri with a population of about 30,000 people. They serve in a parallel model, and they serve between about 20 and 30 families at a time. Kelly Sutton is the coordinator for the Jefferson County, Colorado's Family Integrated Treatment Court, or FIT Court. Jeffco is one of the metro Denver counties, and there's a population of about 500,000 people. And Jeffco operates in an integrated model, serving about 35 to 40 families at a time. We chose these two panelists, both from peer learning courts, to intentionally offer perspectives of two different FTCs that have different models and demographics. So hopefully one will speak to you as you're starting to apply some of these strategies. So I will preface this with, we do not have all the answers. As we're talking, you might notice that some of the answers to your questions are, it depends, or it's a balancing act. So we really encourage you to take into account what your family's needs are. What are the characteristics of the families and kids in your programs, your community's needs and demographics. Some strategies that work in an integrated model might not work in a parallel model, and vice versa. It'll depend on your FTC's goals, your partners, how you collaborate, how you communicate. Overall, we're not saying you don't need phases, so I'll start there. But we do think that we need to start balancing the need for accountability and equity within the phase structure with the need to be individualized and responsive to the family's needs. So this is not easy work. We know that, but we think from the response that we've seen over the past year as we've dove into this topic that we're ready for it. We're ready to really make the FTC model responsive to the child welfare system and responsive to our family's needs. So this is kind of a mindset change. And we think if you can leave here today with that idea that we're changing that mindset, then we'll be able to explore some of the ways to do it and hear from you guys about what's working and what's not. But it is a way for a lot of us to get back to why most of us started or stayed working in an FTC, to help families make real changes to keep children safe. Personally, I started as a child welfare caseworker on a family treatment court team, actually in Jefferson County, Colorado, where Kelly's from. And I stayed in the field because it allows me to stay rooted to the why of what we're doing this work. We can use the FTC model to break the cycle of child abuse and neglect due to substance use disorders and heal families. But we can only do this if we focus our efforts on behavior change instead of just on compliance and checklists. So I want to start with our panelists asking that same question, and then we're going to dive in from there to a couple questions to outline the approach, and then we'll turn it over for some Q&A from you all. So please, just as we're going, go ahead and type in your questions in the chat box, and we'll be checking in on those and doing and answering your questions through there. Also, as you're listening to what we're saying and as you're seeing some of the chat questions, if you guys have some great ideas out there, you can include them in the chat box or reach out to us afterwards because we would love to hear what's working. Like I said, we're by no means know all the answers or know what this should look like in every community, and so we would love to start gathering more information about what you all are doing to focus on behavior change and be family-centered in our FTCs. So with that, let's start with Julie. Can you talk to us about why you're passionate about FTCs? Why did you get in this work, or why are you staying in it?
Sure. Before I started working as the treatment court administrator, I was a public defender in Northeast Missouri, and I would see my clients with substance use disorders go to short-term treatment and then return to the community with no structure or support. They would always return to my caseload within a few months. We'd see them come back. They hadn't really made real changes. I had read about treatment courts. There wasn't one in that jurisdiction at that time. They have one now, but at that time there was not. So when the opportunity came up to be part of a program that made real changes and helped solve the problems that landed people on my caseload in the first place, I took it. That was in 2000. And we were seeing real changes and successes in the criminal court system. So when the Family Treatment Court Planning Initiative came out, we wanted to be part of that as well. We wanted to contribute to system changes that resulted in an increase in permanent reunification and real changes for the families. I'm passionate about it because in a small community like ours, these kids are my kids' friends, classmates, teammates. My daughter had a basketball game last night, and several of our past and current Family Treatment Court participants were there. And to see those parents coaching, supporting their kids in the community activities is a real change in their lives and shows that the program makes real changes for the families and for the community as a whole. So it becomes personal, and you want to see these parents succeed in breaking the cycle of addiction in their family and in our community.
Hey, Julie, sorry, can I stop you? Could you speak up just a little bit? Some of our attendees are having trouble.
Sure.
Sorry, all. Thank you for letting us know.
That's okay. Is that better?
Is that better? I think so. Yeah, thank you.
Actually, is there anything else? Is there anything that you want me to repeat, or are we good?
I think that's good. Thank you, Julie. Kelly, can I ask you the same question and ask you to speak up as much as you can?
Sure. Yeah, let me know if you can hear me. I'll try to talk loud. I also have the child welfare history. I was a case manager in home and also a child welfare caseworker for our family treatment court. And I think I was just very drawn to this because of the systems change and really the focus on treating and healing the entire family and not just kind of focusing on the individual. I think I stay in this work because of the outcomes. These families are not coming back into the system, and there is not repeat child maltreatment when you can really treat the entire family. So I think that's why I'm passionate about this work. It's ever evolving, which I really like about this work. We're always looking at best practices and changing based on our outcomes. We're very data-driven and looking at what we can do best to heal the entire family.
Perfect. Thank you both so much. All right, we're going to dive into our first question, talking about some of the changes you've made. So Kelly, let's start with you. Can you talk a little bit about what your phase structure looked like before you started working towards more behavioral? What did your team focus on? And was there some kind of aha moment or realization that kind of moved you and your team to think about moving to a more behavioral approach?
Yes, I think initially our focus was very much on the individual and the individual parent and their compliance. I think all of our check boxes were very compliance-based into are they attending treatment, are they dropping clean UAs, And our goals were just very different until we kind of had our aha moment. I think what we noticed the most is when we were very compliance-based is some of our families were essentially graduating from our program pretty quickly, and their children had not been returned home yet. So I think we realized we were definitely missing something because there were other barriers that we weren't addressing because we were so focused on kind of that compliance piece. So I think that was kind of our aha moment, and we took a really good look at what we were talking about in our staffings, what we were discussing in our treatment support meetings, and also looking at child need and how we were not necessarily addressing that altogether. So again, I think that was our big aha moment. We also wanted to make sure that our timeline matched a little bit better with treatment timelines as well. So when we made changes to our phase structure, we made sure to consult with our treatment providers to get their feedback on where participants will be kind of in their treatment and in the family treatment court. We spent a lot of time really talking about what the sanction, I think we called it at that point, was going to be. That took up a great deal of our staffing, so we were really kind of missing the roots of why our participants were not engaging in treatment or continuing to use. So once we kind of made that shift and changed the way that we talked about our families and not so much compliance-based and more about those behavioral changes and really started talking about treatment engagement and what do we need to do to help these participants engage in treatment instead of just kind of missing appointments. So I think that was, yeah, kind of our big moment.
Perfect. Thank you. So what I'm hearing you say is that there was making sure needing to align with what the family saw as successful. And so if they're working towards graduation or something which does not equate with what they're trying to do in their child welfare case, then that didn't really speak to them. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Our parents wanted to talk about their parenting time and how do they get more time with their children, how do we move forward, and that didn't match up with kind of the things that the professionals were looking at the time.
Perfect. So we got a question about the difference between an integrated model and a parallel model, and so I just want to take 1 second for that before we switch back over to Julie, because I do think that impact what some of their answers are going to be. So Kelly and Jeffco implement an integrated model for family treatment court. And so that means that their same judge oversees the permanency aspects of the case and the child welfare decisions on parenting time, reunification, case closure, and she also oversees the family treatment court docket. So it's one judge, one team, same professionals working on those goals. Julie's court in Missouri, they're a parallel model, which means there's 2 different judges working on those different aspects. So there's a family treatment court judge who's seeing with the parent weekly or biweekly and talking about their family treatment court goals and needs and really working with them on recovery. And then they have a separate judge who oversees the permanency aspects of the case. So there's pros and cons to both models, and I just wanted to highlight that because as you can see, that there'll be different strategies in one model or another to move to become more family-centered and more behavior-based. So thank you for that question, and I'm sorry we skipped over that. And thank you, Kelly. Let's move to Julie. Julie, can you answer that same question about what things looked like before you started making the switch and if there was an aha moment of sorts that made you guys start moving that direction to be more behavior-centered?
Sure. Our story is very similar, actually. In the beginning, our structure was based just exactly on our criminal court phases. We had minimum time frames, minimum clean time, complete certain treatment curriculums, find employment. Everybody's requirements and program were identical. And our focus, like Kelly's, our focus was on the participant, on their substance use disorder, are they attending treatment, really on the parents only and not the family as a whole. So we had kind of the same situation. We were looking at, just like we did in the adult criminal court, compliance with treatment, compliance with drug testing, and not the family needs as a whole. I'm not sure, I couldn't really identify an aha moment, just the fact that we were continuously seeing parents reunifying with their families, but then they would stop attending. They knew failing to attend class wasn't going to get their children removed from the home.
Sorry, Julie, I I don't want to interrupt you. We're having issues hearing you again. Could you try to speak up? I'm sorry, everyone.
Is that okay? I think I just need to, maybe let me move this a little closer. Is that better?
You guys let us know in the chat if that's better. Sorry. No.
Okay, I can maybe try using.
You want to pick up the phone and see if that helps?
I can maybe try that. Is this better?
I think so. Is that better?
Okay.
Perfect.
Sure. Okay, good. Okay, so what I said was my story is basically the same as Kelly's in the beginning. We focused just on the participant, their substance use, attendance, drug testing, same situation. We weren't looking at the family's needs and the family's progress as a whole. We were just looking at the participant or the parent progress. As far as an aha moment, we really, there wasn't one moment, but we were seeing a lot of parents reunify with their children, but then they would just stop attending. Once the kids were home, they knew, well, just not showing up for group or not showing up for court isn't going to get my children removed again. So there's, they would just stop coming. We would lack engagement in the final stages. So we would have success in that they did better and reunified, but then we didn't have a very good graduation rate because they would just stop coming. We started hearing comments about the program from both sides, since we are a parallel court, that we just weren't matching up with the juvenile court side, the family court side, and the program structure wasn't making sense to anybody. We also were awarded a CAM grant in 2010, and that helped us see that we needed to shift our focus from just the participants to the family as a whole. So that was a big moment, or a big part of our changing to more of a family-centered approach as well.
Perfect. Thank you. So it sounds like you both had similar experiences that differed a little bit because of your models, but overall you needed to make sure that the family spoke to the needs and the goals of the family and the child welfare system. All right, now we're going to dive into a little bit about what you've changed. I know everyone's excited to hear about that. So there was one question that came through about phases, and I think I must have misspoke at the beginning. It was about what do we use instead of phases. So we're not saying get rid of phases. I think when we talk about this topic a little bit and try to encourage a little bit more of an individualized approach, sometimes it sounds like we're saying don't use phases. And so I just wanted to clarify that that's not what we're saying. But as Julie's going to explain specifically in the parallel model, they changed their phases to align more with the child welfare process. And so that's what we're going to dive into next. So Julie, I'll keep it with you. Can you talk about what you guys changed, what your phase structure looks like now, how your discussions changed, and also what's been the biggest challenge?
Sure. We started by just inviting all of our team and the heads of each agency involved in our team and the juvenile court side practitioners as well. And we kind of addressed some of the misconceptions first, but then we sat down and said, how can we make a program that makes sense to both sides? How can we make these match up better and make it something that makes sense to the parents? So what we all kind of decided was the most important thing to the parents and what they cared about the most was that when they could start seeing their children, even with supervised visits, when they could start seeing their kids unsupervised, when they could get them at home, and then when they could have their case closed. So we made our phases fit around those 4 things that were the most important to the parents. So while we kind of say we don't have phases, we don't have a phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 like we did in criminal court, but we have a supervised visit phase, an unsupervised visit phase, an overnight visit phase, and then the trial home visit phase. And then the case is closed at the time of graduation from family treatment court. The juvenile court case closes at the same time as the family treatment court graduation occurs. And what we did was we wanted to have an individualized plan for each person so that they could address the issues that they had individually. But we also tried to get everybody on board with some of the basics for each phase. So, testing clean before we can do unsupervised for a certain amount of time. And we set some basics in place and then individualized from there. We tried to individualize them based on the family's strengths and their needs and add in some personalized goals. So we do let the parents help with the goal setting for each of those phases. We also have switched to focus more on the children and the family as a whole in staffing and in court. The judge doesn't just ask about treatment when they're in court anymore, like have you been attending this week? Have you made all your groups? He focuses more on the family as a whole. He'll ask questions about how their visits went that week, or if they just started overnights, how that went, or maybe how the kids are doing in school, or how they're doing if they're in any sort of counseling, and just basically tried to shift the focus over in all aspects of the program to the family and not just the participant themselves. I would say that the biggest challenge in making the shift is that sometimes we tend to still let those phases and those goal sheets for each phase get a little bit cookie cutter. Sometimes we get set and, let's just do this, this, and this, and we forget to get maybe a little bit more of the participants' input and make sure that it's personalized and getting those goals set and making sure that the participant feels like they have input in it.
Perfect. Thank you, Julie.
Sure.
So a question came through about what it means to have a focus on the family. So that's a pretty big topic that I think this fits in really nicely with. But in general, we call it taking a family-centered approach. And so I think we heard a little bit of what Julie was saying as far as making sure to talk about the needs of the family, the needs of the children, talking about the parent-child relationship, parenting time, all of those things. Sometimes when we talk about family-centered treatment or family-centered approach, people automatically go to the idea of mom and dad and child in some kind of residential treatment together, which is great and is definitely a method to have family-centered treatment. But there's lots of ways to be family-centered, and we definitely want to see our family treatment courts really doing that, so taking that family-centered approach. And one method is to really look at your phase structures and look at your phase requirements and make sure that there's requirements to help move the family to a family wellness, right? So helping the parents and teaching them or supporting them in how to do that. So not just focusing on things related to substance use, but doing a bigger view of recovery. There was also a question that came through about domestic violence, and I think that's a great question because what we know is that we can't only focus on substance use because that's not the only concern that's usually with these families. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kelly because I know the Jeffco Fit Court really works through a lot of these concerns or questions. And so Kelly, can you talk about the changes you've made and also focus on that family-centered approach and some other treatment issues that often come up with our families?
Sure. And the big change that we made are some of those behavioral markers within our phases. So our court still has the phases, but we added a lot of different components around that actual parenting time and parents' involvement in kind of their children's needs when children are placed out of home. So kind of in our beginning phases, we want to make sure now that parents are really aware of what's going on with their kiddos. So what services their kiddos have, what services they may need. If we do an assessment on kids' needs, we really want parents to be a part of that if they can safely do that. In phase 2, again, we want to make sure that then our parents are really actively engaging in meeting their children's needs. So I think when we start talking about this early, it's a great time to really identify kids' needs and the parents' needs in regard to, do parents need extra support around just basic parenting skills, or is there a therapeutic approach that's needed? So it's so important that we kind of have the right clinicians there to have those conversations so we can identify those things early. So then our parents aren't kind of moving through these phases when they're not able to meet their children's needs or participate in that intervention that's needed. And so once we get to our higher phases, then we really want to see parents really taking over that responsibility for their children's needs, and that they're parenting without kind of restrictions around their parenting time, and they have an awareness of their children's needs. I think that makes it to where we can be more individualized. So we still have some of those kind of compliance markers within our phases to move parents through the program, but here's where we really get that opportunity to look at the individual family and the individual parent and identify what services will we need or things that we haven't addressed to help them get to where they need to be. We've really changed the way that we talk at staffing around families. I think we've noticed that if we do kind of a little compliance rundown and then kind of take it back to what's going on in parenting time, are we able to increase parenting time? Why or why not? Is there something that we're missing there? How are the kids responding to parenting time? Is this benefiting them? If not, then we can take a look at that and see is there a service there or something we're missing there? And it just really shifts the conversation to be more individualized for that family. So I think that was a big shift for us, and it's a challenge to always make sure that we're focusing on that because, you know, there's often crisis that comes up that we need to address, and we need to talk about it staffing. But if we generally stay kind of structured in the way that we talk about it, we're finding that those conversations are much richer and less about compliance and more about engagement for both the parent and the child. Same with we have a monthly treatment support meeting, and we really shifted that to talk about kids first and really have parents' voice at the table to make sure that they're understanding and have awareness that their kids' needs and that they're able to participate. That's another opportunity for us to really engage foster families and kinship around the same thing and make sure that they are on the same page that we really want parents to be participating and taking over some of that responsibility. And again, we're able to identify where they need that extra support. Let's see, that's another piece too that we kind of touched on is our families come in with domestic violence, criminal issues, some pretty serious mental health issues, and we have really shifted to feeling more comfortable talking about those issues during treatment support meetings, during staffing, and having that addressed through the court. Some of that was just making sure, again, that we have the right people at the table. We had some domestic violence providers come in and actually observe one of our staffings. They've done a few trainings for our team where we kind of are able to ask them, you know, how do we talk about this at staffing? How do we address it along with the substance abuse treatment? How do we make sure that we're not just addressing the substance abuse treatment and kind of missing these other big pieces? So again, I would kind of say having the right clinicians and people at the table who are familiar with kind of the structure of a problem-solving course in a family treatment course. We've just built those relationships up, and we really feel more comfortable having those conversations and kind of tying that into how our parents move through the court. Again, I think we spend less time now talking about kind of what we used to call sanctions and now we call responses. And if we really kind of focus on what treatment needs there still are for the family, that really kind of helps us come up with a good response to the family that maybe will help kind of move them towards change.
Thank you. So Kelly, a question just came through about working with families if the kids have not been removed. And so I know in fit court, you guys do work with families in-home and out-of-home. And Julie, do you guys as well?
We have not started yet. We're hoping to start that in the near future.
Okay, so this is one of those examples where we're all working on some of these
yes.
issues.
We're in the planning process of that track, yes.
Perfect. Kelly, can you talk at least in an integrated model how you're using that approach in-home with kids in-home just as well as with families who have out-of-home placement?
Yes, so we do have families come into our treatment courts where kids are home. Many times that's because there is a pretty significant safety plan in place or a safe person in the home. So I would say kind of bringing them into all of this is very, very important. We also have in-home case managers that work with our families and clinicians, and so they're at the table as well for all of our conversations. So when we're kind of getting those updates on how the family's doing at home, we're kind of looking for those same behavioral markers. Are they engaged in their children's needs? Do they know how to set up all of their medical, developmental, educational, services for the kids? Where are those deficits? Where may they need a little bit more support in order to move to where they are parenting without restriction? Because I would say 99% of the time, the kids that are still in home, there's still some pretty significant restrictions around their parenting time just to ensure that the kiddo is safe. So then we're really working on moving to where they don't need those types of restrictions and that we're addressing the exact same thing. Does that kind of answer it, Tessa?
Yeah, thank you. That's definitely it's a big topic. A lot of family treatment courts, just as Julie said, are working on shifting to serving the in-home population and using some of the new resources that are coming up through federal legislation for that. And so we're always looking for examples if anyone is using this in-home family approach. So please let us know. I did want to mention some of the ideas that Kelly and Julie have been talking about. Are listed in our best practices staffing guide that you'll see up in the handouts. And so there's some tips on how to handle staffing, or questions asked during staffings and questions asked for the judge to talk with the parent and in court. So please download that as well. We're also getting a lot of questions about effective responses or sanctions and incentives, which is completely part of this conversation. It goes hand in hand. We are developing more material on this. As you all have maybe heard, the Family Treatment Court standards are getting ready to be released upcoming this year, which we're very, very excited about. And so there'll be new guidance on responding to behavior. Julie, I'm wondering if you guys have shifted at all in your responding to behavior, if your approach has changed at all, anything that you would want to share?
We did. When we shifted more to the family-centered approach, we actually don't talk about sanctions at all in our family treatment court. We just have treatment responses. We try to just use responses, and then we have a incentive system, though. We did keep that part. They have a form that they bring each week, and anytime they go to their meetings, if they go to if they have a UA, if they have an individual session or group session, they get a signature. Then they turn those signatures in for tokens, and they can use those tokens to purchase personal hygiene items, snacks, things like that at the treatment center. So we have tried to, since we're not using sanctions, we're only using treatment responses, we've tried to enhance our reward system a little bit more to try to make that more effective.
Perfect. Thank you. We're also getting a lot of questions about seeing Julie and Kelly's phase structures. Both of them are part of our peer learning court program, and they're very willing to share any of their documents. So we can absolutely share Julie's parallel phase structure and what that looks like, and then with the Jeffco court, what their integrated changes have looked like. So no problem there. Also wanted to mention that along with the standards that are coming out, there will also be a Learning Academy webinar just like this on responding to behavior, and that will be out in March. So make sure you stay on our listserv and you'll get information about that. And that information will be based on the new standards. So Julie, I'm going to go back to you. Can you talk a little bit about any results that you've seen as you all have made a shift, whether that's in your team or in your families that you're working with?
Sure. As far as the team goes and the staff, I would just say kind of what I said before about that we talk more about the children's needs and about the family's needs in staffing and in court. But as far as results, I ran a couple numbers just before we started, and I looked at 2008, 2009, and 2010. That's before we made the shift. And we had, in 2008, we had just 3 family treatment court graduates and 3 terminations, so it was about even. In 2009, we had 6 graduations and 8 terminations. And in 2010, it was even. We had 5 and 5. The last 2 years, after we've made this shift and it's been going this way for quite some time, several years, I would say we probably changed our phase structure 2013 or 2014. In 2017, we had 18 graduates and 10 terminations. So we're taking more people in, but just the difference in how many more graduations than we had terminations is what we were looking at. And then last year, we had 16 graduations and 10 terminations. So what we feel like we've seen anecdotally is that parents stay engaged throughout the program instead of losing interest and kind of fading out of the program once the children come home. Some of the goals that we have in that final phase before the case is closed are things that they have set and that they want to accomplish. Maybe it's taking college classes or training for a specific job they've always wanted, but they have input and are invested in those goals instead of just kind of checking off a list of our predetermined goals. So they know if they attend all their appointments, work with their parent aide, and do their part in completing their goals, that we'll also do ours and move them through the program at their own pace. So I think we've just seen an increase in engagement and retention in the program since making the change.
Thank you. Kelly, the same question. What results have you seen? And then if you want to weave in there a little bit too about how you guys had changed responding to behavior.
Sure. When we look at our data, there's definitely been a significant difference from when we made kind of those big changes within our phase structure and then adding a little bit more time in actual treatment course. Less recidivism. The families that are getting this intervention are not coming back into the system as often, which is great and everything that we're really striving for, and also less time in out-of-home care for our kids that are out of home. We've really been focused on how do we work with families with children in home. So that's been a big change. I think that our children are, and families as a whole, children and parents are getting services earlier because we're starting these conversations earlier. So we're able to identify where those concerns are and where the strengths are. So here's parent strengths. We can increase parenting time because we're seeing all of these good things happen. And then, oh wait, here we're seeing some concerns. One intervention, do we know what assessment do we have to make sure that we're kind of addressing that barrier? I think I talked about we feel more comfortable talking about those other issues like domestic violence, criminal issues, and major mental health concerns, and less time talking about the responses. And here's where I can kind of talk about the shift. When we very first started, we had this very kind of grid on, how you respond to behavior and what the sanction is, and we really moved away from that based on a lot of feedback from Children and Family Futures and kind of looking at our outcomes. And now we're really looking at responding to that specific behavior. So we're able to be more treatment focused. Is this a treatment issue? Do they need more professional contact in, one part of their treatment? Do they need to have an increase in their treatment? And we kind of have those professionals at the table to have those conversations. We kind of look at that health, home, community, and purpose as well. So is this family connected to their community? Is that something that we could come up with a response that would help them connect more to their community? Do they need help with job searching? Is that kind of something that will help move them along? So do we send them to the Career Resource Center? So I think we're getting much more creative in how we're responding to those behaviors based on what it is that we're seeing and when it's happening, kind of in what phase is that happening. And just really trying to be treatment focused to help them get the outcome that we're all looking for and what the family's looking for. So yeah, that's been a big shift, and I think just the way we talk about our families has changed all the way from the bench to even how Respondent Parent Council approaches every hearing. We're not just talking about those compliance things and parents are coming up with a bunch of excuses on why they missed treatment, but instead we're talking about how are you engaging in treatment? Oh, there was a relapse. Let's walk through that. Let's do kind of an autopsy of that relapse and see where you need a little bit more support. So we do a lot of that kind of in the moment responding to behavior.
Perfect. What I'm hearing you both say is as you've shifted to responding to behavior instead of sanctioning, it's really looking at how to re-engage or remotivate your families into treatment and into the program instead of just looking at being punitive or following a grid because, a parent's in X number of phase and had whichever behavior. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. We did get a question, and since you all were talking about your outcomes a little bit, about your average time frame for reunification. Can you share that, and if that's changed at all, if you know if that's changed at all? Julie, I'll start with you.
Okay. For us, I would say for probably 9 to 12 months is kind of average for us, closer to 12 usually. We have we might have somebody who comes in and maybe has a great home plan, has a great, might go through a little faster, maybe be home at 9 months, but usually it's around 12 months for us. I can't think of a whole, there, a few longer, a few shorter than that, but I would say around a year for us. And then since our last phase of trial home visit, they're home sooner than that, but the actual permanency is 12 months.
Okay, thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, looking at timeframes for parents who are completing our family treatment course, those families are usually involved with us somewhere between 12 and 18 months. but kids are going home quite a bit sooner. We looked at our average a couple of years ago, and we were still kind of at this like 10-month mark where kids weren't going home for 10 months. So again, kind of paired with this change, we started talking more about how do we work with kids in the home safely, with keeping, that child safety really in mind. And we've been able to see kids going home a lot sooner and more like that 6 to 8 month range. And something, again, that we're still really working on. How do we continue to make this change and work with kids better at home?
So we're getting some questions in and also got some previously when everyone registered about how to handle relapse and how that impacts parenting time or reunification, how it impacts families if the children are already home or stayed home. I'll start. Kelly, can you start that? I know you all have done a lot of work around what relapse looks like and safety planning. So can you share just how FitCourt has seen the perspective of that and how you all respond or consider responses when there's a relapse?
Sure, and this might be one of those times where I'll have to say it kind of depends on what's going on for that family. But I would say if the relapse is happening kind of further into their involvement and kids are home, we definitely look at kind of what the circumstances were, what happened, was the child safe, I guess is kind of the biggest thing that we're looking at. And did the participant use their tools? Did they leave the kid with someone safe and call everyone right away and re-engage with their treatment provider? I think all those things we're looking at instead of just kind of an automatic removal or like a phased regression within our family treatment court. I think many years ago that could have resulted in a phased regression, and best practice says that doesn't work, and I think we realized it wasn't working. So then we really just kind of take a look at where the family is, what happened around that relapse, who are their support people, did they use their support people, then how do we build up that support system or utilize them instead of maybe having to move to where we completely restrict parenting time. Of course, there's those situations where the parenting time does have to be restricted because of the incident and because of the relapse, but many times we're able to kind of regroup, look at that safety plan again, look at that support network again, re-engage treatment if we need to in a different way to make sure that we kind of are still moving forward.
So it sounds like it's no longer an automatic response about restricting parenting time or moving back phases.
It's not, absolutely, yeah.
Julie, can I ask you that same question?
Sure, I agree with Kelly. We handle it really very much the same way. It depends on the situation, if it was a safety risk, but it's really the identical answer. We just look at all the circumstances around it, try to come up with a treatment response to address whatever issues led to the relapse, and then the only time visitation would be affected was if it was a safety issue. And in the early stages, really, if they're getting supervised visitation still, it usually will not, as long as they're not showing up at the visits in a state that we don't want children to see them that way, as long as they're showing up for the supervised visits and it's not a safety issue, we really don't change anything early on either.
Yeah, that's all. But one thing I also heard you both say was how important it is to have your treatment providers at the table, offering clinical recommendations and following those recommendations. As you, and Julie, I'll start with you, as you have shifted to this approach, has your relationship with the treatment providers changed or has their role changed?
I would say their role has maybe changed the least amount because they're still focused on the substance use treatment. We have, and it may be different in bigger jurisdictions where you have more than one, multiple treatment providers. We just have one treatment provider, so it's very easy to keep them engaged in our goal setting process. So really they're very involved. I guess the one way that their role has changed is they're very involved in setting those goals for the next step in visitation. But like I said, we have one provider, so it's kind of easy for us to do that. I would say that would probably be more difficult in bigger jurisdictions. But I guess just the increase in their input in how far they need to be in each curriculum, what curriculum they need to use, whether they need to do the parenting or the trauma or the other books along with Stay and Quit, and how to work that. how to work that into the participants' goals and moving to the next set of visitation status.
Thank you. Kelly, do you have anything to add there?
Kind of the same. Our treatment providers are very involved kind of in every aspect, which I think is so important. And they're really able to help us come up with, there we go, sorry, my computer turned off. They're able to help us to come up with great ways to kind of respond to behavior. I think also just always keeping in mind the level of treatment and making sure that families are in the right level of treatment. We discuss that all of the time, and having our providers right there at the table to have that conversation with us. I think we're getting people into the right level of treatment at the very beginning and addressing it all the way throughout their involvement with the family drug court. So that's been extremely beneficial.
Wonderful. All right, our last kind of set question, and then we'll keep using some of our open Q&A. What advice do you both have for teams considering this approach? Julie, let's start with you.
Sure. I would say if you're looking at switching to this approach, that the first thing to do, whether it's a parallel or an integrated model, is to sit down with all the your team members, and also, you know, we tried to get supervisor positions involved as well, like for our children's vision, we tried to get you know, the circuit managers, people higher up besides just your immediate team involved, and to sit down and discuss some of the different phase structures, what you think is important to put in each, you know, in each set for goals. There might be some standards that everybody agrees upon, and then it seems like it works better that way if each agency has input and is involved in creating those standards or the goals that that you want to use. That's really, communication really between the agencies is the main issue that we tried to make sure we stressed, and making sure that everybody had input and had a chance to discuss it in kind of a group setting before we just said, hey, we're going to make all these changes. So basically just opening it up to input from everybody involved would be my advice before making any major changes.
Perfect. Kelly, can I ask you that same question? What advice would you offer?
I agree on having the stakeholders involved at every level. I think using the best practice standards, that's always really helpful for our team, kind of bringing it back to that. And just kind of those agreed upon values. I think whenever you can kind of do an activity like that with your larger team, you really do find that everybody has the same values, and then it's about how do we get there, what changes do we need to make, looking at your data, you know, where do we need to shift kind of how we're operating, and then also having those moments to kind of check back in. So is this, you know, still working, and just being able to really be open to evolving with the process. Because it does come with some challenges, but I think if you can always go back to everybody kind of having that shared values discussion and that shared mission, it's really easy to kind of make some of these shifts.
And one thing I want to highlight that you said, and I think Julie would probably agree about, using data and really making sure that we're making data-informed decisions. I think you both of your courts are really strong in using data and gathering that monthly, using that data dashboard and you know, realizing where maybe we're missing parents or where, you know, reasons why that they're not engaging. And so we're always happy to hear when FTCs are making those data-informed decisions. All right, we have a couple more questions coming in. Kelly, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on if family treatment court phases should mirror treatment phases?
So when we redeveloped our phases, we did consult with our treatment providers. So we kind of made some decisions based on where a participant would be if they started treatment right away, when they were in kind of active treatment, and then when they're in aftercare. So I would say we tried to really kind of adhere to that and work, and kind of that works well together. So when they're in kind of those final phases, that they really are in their aftercare treatment as well. And I'll say that for the majority of our families, that really does match up pretty well. So kind of our phase 2 is the longest phase, where there's a lot going on, a lot around parenting time, a lot around treatment, and that really does match up with active treatment. So we definitely consulted with them when we made the lengths of our phases and kind of the treatment components in those phases.
And I think one thing you also incorporated along with that was that reunification. So there was a question coming in about, how long does reunification take and where in the process does a child reunify? And so can you talk a little bit about how you incorporated, especially in an integrated court, reunification into the phase structure to ensure there's some support before case closure?
Yes, and reunification can really happen at any time in those early phases, but once you get to our phase 3 and phase 4, which is kind of where you're starting that aftercare planning, a participant actually cannot move to the next phase unless children have been reunified or there's at least been an increase in parenting time. So we kind of try to mirror that as well. So as parenting time is increasing and the amount of supervision of that parenting time is decreasing, then they're also moving through our phases. So then a participant isn't getting to kind of phase 4, so where their case may close soon, and we haven't had kind of a good chunk of time with kids being in home.
Thank you. Julie, can you talk a little bit about the treatment phases with your phases and how those work together?
Sure, I agree. Ours is very similar. Our phases mirror the treatment phases. We really want to have them finished with the main part of their treatment before the kids return to the home on the trial home visit. One of the goals is usually that they've completed their treatment and they present their aftercare plan on the court date before the kids go home on the trial home visit. And then we try to use that final phase, the trial home visit phase, as an opportunity and a time to get them involved in community support and outside support. But the early phases really do match up and mirror how they're progressing through treatment.
And about how long after children return home, even if on the trial home visit, how long are families staying involved in the FTC before case closure?
Usually 2 to 3 months for that. Sometimes a little bit less, but usually 2 months is what we aim for during the trial home visit phase. And we try to have, supports, parent aides and things like that, and really be finished with their treatment before they get that far.
Can either of you talk about, you talked about time to reunification. Are you also tracking time or retracking recidivism, reentry, those sort of outcomes as well? Julie?
We do. We try to look at it. Usually our reports that we can run are 6 months out, 1 year, and 2 years is what we usually look at for those.
And have you seen any impact on those outcomes since moving to this approach?
I'm not sure that we've compared those. Anecdotally, yes, but I'm not sure that we've actually run the numbers to see. Just because I feel like it's a little bit more of a comprehensive program. I feel like just being in a small community and knowing those families, I feel like we have done better. But I have not specifically looked at those before and after the date of changing our structure.
Thank you. Kelly, how about you all? Have you been tracking those?
Yep, we've been tracking that as well, and we can also do the 1 year and 2 year outcomes. And I think, again, kind of anecdotally, and we're taking a deeper look into this as well, since we made some pretty significant changes to our structure, and we have seen less recidivism, and even less recidivism where it ends in a child being removed. So if a case does come back, it may be back for an open assessment, but not necessarily get to where there's another removal. So we've kind of seen progress in all aspects of that.
Thank you. All right, shifting gears slightly, we received a question about engaging families or parents into the recovery community. So obviously that's something that, instead of looking at the compliance of, attended so many support group meetings or 12-step meetings, how are you monitoring that to be more behavior-based and to see some adherence to that? Kelly, do you want to start?
Sure, yes, and that's huge, and that's always something that we're trying to improve upon, is really getting our families very involved in the recovery community. We tie incentives to that as well, instead of just making it part of our phase structure, which it is. Part of our phase structure is that parents need to be attending some type of community support activities about recovery in the community in order to move through the phases, and then kind of adding an incentive when they're going above and beyond. Using peer supports, that's another thing that we're really trying to improve upon, identifying where those are. Some of our treatment providers are hiring peer supports, so again, kind of making sure that they're very present and available to our families. So they often come actually to court and just kind of hang out there or connecting them through their treatment provider. Also, kind of once we get to the final phases, it is a requirement that our participants participate in some type of alumni group. So we have an alumni group, and one of our treatment providers has an alumni group, and they have lots of meetings monthly and activities, and so that's part of being able to complete the program is engaging in that. So again, just kind of doing anything we can to get them connected to that community, and sometimes it really does help to have an incentive around that as well.
Wonderful. Julie?
We do the same, actually. In our final phase, we require that they attend our alumni group. We're very excited that in, I think October is when she started, we have a new peer support specialist who is a graduate of our family treatment program. So we're hoping that that is going to help improve that aspect of our program. And that's a place where we've struggled, especially in a rural community. There aren't daily meetings that people can go to. There's not a lot of support groups out there. So we rely on our alumni and our peer support to start strengthening that.
Thank you. Okay, I think we have time for about 2 more questions. This next one is a little involved, but I bet you guys both have some good strategies. There's a question about how do you handle discharge and making decisions about if it's time for a parent to be discharged from the family treatment court, and what strategies, especially around engagement, do you put into place before deciding to discharge somebody? Julie, do you want to start?
I would say, honestly, we do our best to engage the participants all the way through, and we have a service coordinator besides our peer support that can help with engagement and trying to keep participants participating in treatment, as well as all of the outside services that we have. We very rarely terminate families that are making at least some sort of effort at participating. I would say really terminations are more often a result of parents just no longer participating. It's really more self-imposed sometimes than it is a formal termination hearing. We do have them occasionally, but it's pretty rare. A lot of times it's the result of no contact or no participation, and then when they go back to the juvenile court hearing, the goal might be changed to guardianship or to TPR, and then it's really kind of out of our hands. We try to, as long as they're making any kind of effort, we try to keep the parents participating. That answer.
Thank you. Kelly, can you take that one too?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, sometimes we have parents who just show up to court, and that's fine, because then there's our opportunity to try to engage them. When we have discharged a family or a parent from family treatment court, it's really, we haven't seen them since orientation. So they're not going to visit, they're not going to treatment, they never really got engaged in treatment, we can't find them, and they're not showing up to court hearings. Those are usually the families that we do give it quite a few months, and we try everything. Every team member really goes to a great length to try to connect with that parent and get a peer support involved if we can. But yeah, a discharge really looks like we have not seen them for a very long time, and we will work with someone who is minimally participating and use that time that we see them to try to engage.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we're going to finish up with one last question, but I did want to let everyone know that we're getting lots of questions about sanctions and the phases, and so those will be posted on our website, which is posted in the chat box, as well as our blog, and we'll also follow up with some of those materials in the email, in a post email, so we'll have those coming as well. And as we mentioned, both Kelly and Julie or both the Dunklin County and the Jefferson County courts are part of our peer learning court program, and there's also a website for that, which Russ just posted. Thank you, Russ. And so please go visit that. You can see their profiles, get information about the program, and there's also contact information. They're available for site visits if you want to go see their work, and also to connect to connect with them, to learn about their process, and to have conversations. So please use that resource as well. Let's finish this. Can you guys give kind of one last piece of advice or suggestion or closing comment that you'd like to share? Julie, go ahead. Sorry, I keep forgetting to prompt you there.
I would just add that what you just said, I would just like to reiterate on that there's no reason to reinvent materials if you're thinking about making this change, or to start from scratch. That please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to share our program manuals, handbooks, that kind of thing. We're always available for a visit. We just had a Tennessee court here last week, or we can do virtual visits or phone calls. But just to, if you're thinking about making this change, to reach out to a court that's already doing it.
Yes, and I would also add that Dunklin and Jeffco are not the only two courts doing this work. So we have lots of examples from across the country, and could likely connect you with somebody that mirrors your kind of situation or your community. So thank you for that, Julie. Kelly, last advice or comment?
Yeah, I think exactly what Julie said. Sharing materials is so helpful, and it's helped us learn as well. The change really wasn't as hard as it seemed it would be. I think once we really kind of started really focusing on this, it kind of worked for every discipline and every stakeholder. So yeah, I would say just find that, common value in that theme, and yeah, it's been great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for being on and sharing your experiences. I think it's been really useful. Just a couple of reminders as we finish up. There is a 20-minute pre-recorded video that's on our website, and we will be posting all of the materials that are listed in that handout, as well as the phase examples, some of the responses. Watch out for our March webinar on responding to behavior as we talk about best practices under the new FTC standards. And as always, please contact us if training or technical assistance needs. We'd love to hear from you. Contact us if you have ideas, want to share the work that you've been doing. And thank you all for joining and for all of your really great questions. And with that, I will turn it back over to William.
Great. Thank you, Tessa. Just a few last-minute items for our audience before we adjourn. You may contact NTTAC through the website displayed on the slide here. You can stay up to date on the latest information by signing up for NTTAC's TTA listserv. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook at OJJDP NTTA. You can also contact OJJDP via the help desk by following the contact information on this slide. And as a reminder, the webinar recording will be archived on NTTAC's YouTube channel, where you can also view past webinars. For the event transcript or any other supporting materials, please contact the OJJDP NTTA Help Desk. Please take a few seconds to review the disclaimer. And lastly, we would appreciate it if you could take about 5 minutes to complete the feedback via the evaluation that we will have for you. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.